Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Before we begin, please be aware that live interpretation for English to Spanish or Spanish to English is available throughout the event. To access this, please choose the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and choose a language. This is a momentous week for taking action on climate change. With President Biden's Leaders Summit just 2 days away, and leaders from across the globe raising their own goals to reduce emissions and enhance resilience. In that context, on behalf of the Friends of Ocean and Climate, I welcome you warmly to this vital and hopeful conversation on how ocean-based solutions contribute to net zero. The leaders' commitment in this event and the very real solutions they are already implementing will help put us on a path to meet the 1.5 degree target and contribute to the overall success of the summit and COP26 and beyond. My name is Jane Lubchenco, Deputy Director of Climate and Environment at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and I am honored to be your moderator today. I wish to express my profound gratitude to all of our speakers today. His Excellency President David Kabua of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, His Excellency Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama of Fiji, His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Justice and Minister of the North Sea of Belgium, Vincent van Quickenborne, His Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile's Andreas Aleman, His Excellency Minister for the Pacific and the Environment, Lord Zach Goldsmith of the United Kingdom, His Excellency Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway, Mr. Sveinge Rutevatn, His Excellency Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica, Her Excellency, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica, Andrea Mesa Murillo, His Excellency Minister of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment of Seychelles, Flavien Joubert, Deputy Director General for Engineering Affairs, Maritime Bureau, Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism, Mr. Hideaki Saito, Governor David Ige of the U.S. State of Hawaii, U.S. Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, and U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John F. Kerry. I would also like to welcome our audience, which includes ambassadors, leaders from the public and private sectors, the conservation community, experts from academia, young people, and concerned scientists who are following us from all corners of the planet via Zoom and YouTube today. I wish to extend my gratitude to Ocean Conservancy and the UN Foundation for their support of today's event. Thank you, everyone, for helping us elevate the role of the ocean in the climate crisis. What brings us together today is a shared passion for the ocean and a shared concern about climate change. We look to the ocean to refresh our bodies, renew our souls, and touch our hearts. We also know that the global ocean is indeed central to our health, food security, prosperity, and well-being. And now, thanks to scientists and leaders like our guests, we also understand that the ocean is not only a victim of climate change, but a powerful source of solutions to help tackle the climate emergency. So we come together today to talk about action, about solutions, about hope, and about what we can do and are doing to mitigate the effects of climate change and build resilience in the face of the changes already underway. We know that from ocean acidification to sea level rise, climate impacts are profoundly damaging ocean communities, ecosystems, and economies worldwide. The science is clear. The ocean is taking the heat from climate change, absorbing 90% of the heat and up to a third of the carbon dioxide over the decades. As a result, the ocean is getting warmer, more acidic, less productive, and less predictable. Rapid global decarbonization is the single most important thing that can be done to protect the ocean and communities and livelihoods that depend on its health. Rapid global decarbonization. Near-term and mid-century ambition are essential to limit warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Countries must rapidly and continually increase their climate ambition and decrease emissions. So today, we are flipping the script on the ocean, from victim to solution. The ocean is a hero in this story, a potential hero. We now know that the ocean is not too big to fail, nor is it too big to fix. We are beginning to understand the myriad and fundamental ways in which the ocean is so central to our future that it is too big to ignore. Make no mistake, when it comes to effectively tackling climate change, the ocean is too big to ignore. As Special Envoy Kerry and many others have noted, our ocean and climate are intimately connected and interdependent. We are breaking down the silos between climate action and ocean action in favor of ocean-based solutions to climate change. So what are these and how do they work? That's why we're here today. According to a report commissioned by the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, for which I served as a science advisor, ocean-based solutions could provide up to 1/5 of the annual emission reductions needed to achieve the 1.5 degree target by 2050. That's huge, 21%. Armed with this knowledge, it is now time for us to seize this moment. Today, we will hear about such solutions as ocean-based renewable energy like wind, wave, tidal, current, and thermal, improvements in ocean-based shipping, protecting and restoring the powerful blue carbon ecosystems, salt marshes, mangroves, seagrass beds, and building climate-resilient fisheries and conserving habitats in climate-smart ways to increase ocean protections globally. It is indeed fortuitous that this year, an all-hands-on-deck moment for climate ambitions, is also the beginning of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. More and better coordinated ocean science will help us track the changes occurring in our waters and uncover new solutions to climate change. Today, as we focus on climate change, we also welcome the knowledge that taking smart, vigorous climate action can also achieve other critically important goals, such as social justice, community resilience, human health, protecting biodiversity, and hastening economic recovery. As we will hear today, ocean-based solutions offer exciting examples of how we can achieve both mitigation and adaptation with the same actions, breaking down the silos that often characterize discussions of either. When it comes to the ocean, to our one ocean, silos don't work. Each nation must take a whole of government approach to catalyze ocean climate solutions, and all governments must work together. The stars are aligning to point us toward action on the international and national stages. As we seek to raise global ambition on climate action, the ocean is an indispensable ally that we have only just begun to engage. Our speakers today are on the cutting edge of that work, setting examples that can be replicated by other countries. So let's dive in. Today, we gather with a group of leaders that are true champions of both ocean and climate action. We will hear what they are doing to raise ambition around the ocean and climate action and how they are turning ambition into action. I am delighted that, led by Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry, the U.S. is firmly back as a partner on the global climate action stage. I am pleased to invite Special Envoy Kerry to join me for a conversation about the ocean's role in addressing the climate crisis and preview how that fits into the President's Leaders Summit on Climate later this week. We know that Special Envoy Kerry is no stranger to the climate change challenge, having championed climate action from the U.S. Senate and while serving as Secretary of State for President Obama in 2013 to 2017, where he led U.S. negotiations of the Paris Climate Agreement. He is equally famous for his leadership on ocean issues, having initiated, for example, the Our Ocean Conference while Secretary of State, catalyzing hundreds of commitments and actions to protect ocean health and all of us who rely on it. Special Envoy Kerry, thank you for joining us today, especially right on top of your very successful trip. And let me begin with a question. Greenhouse gas pollution is having devastating effects on the communities and economies that rely on a healthy ocean. We are not currently on track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And the U.S. has not in recent years been a voice for climate ambition on the international stage. So what is your vision for getting the climate effort on track?
Well, thank you, Jane, Dr. Lubchenco. It's a great honor for me to be here among the friends of the ocean and climate countries. This is, as Jane has said, a critical conversation. I don't think it's so much my vision as a shared vision of President Biden and this administration about where we are and where we need to go. And I appreciate your comments introducing the concept of the summit. I want to thank you personally because you worked with me. I worked with you. We worked together when I was Secretary of State, and I'm so grateful that you're now back working at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And you're the right person to be there, and we're glad to have you there. But let me just talk straight with everybody here. I'm privileged to be the Special Envoy. I was privileged to be in Paris, and actually I go back to the first COP in Rio in 1992 and Kyoto and many COPs in between. And I have to tell you, I come here today, as I'm sure some of you do, with not a small amount of frustration about where we find ourselves and what's going on, and with a heightened sense of urgency because the planet is really in a bad place. Countries are in a bad place. And we have these 6 months between now, 6 months or so, a little more, between now and Glasgow, to pull ourselves together and to create the effort that this really requires. I know many of you have heard people talk about how this crisis is existential. And for many of you on this meeting, in this meeting, you are the representatives of the existential. Some people who are wealthy nations, wealthy people will fare okay somehow, but there are a lot of folks, there's an unfairness in all of this. 80% of all the emissions that are causing this problem comes from 20 countries. And that is why a lot of countries sit there and are, feeling an unfairness in this, that they're victimized and the other countries aren't doing enough. Today's headline. This is The Guardian in London. And the headline is carbon emissions to soar in 2021 by second highest rate in history. And the reason it's the second is there's 2008, 2009 with the economic crash. So we had the economic crash and we have COVID. Similar, even with the reductions of COVID, we're going to be soaring. And so we can't have an economic recovery that's self-defeating because it is premised on big time additional climate costs. So we need a blue-green recovery. And let me just talk for a minute about the green part of it, and then I think Jane and I will have a chance to chat about the other side of it. We're currently, if we did everything in the Paris Agreement, we're still going to have a warming of the planet to about 3.7 degrees. And we're not doing everything that we said we would do. Because we're not, we're actually headed somewhere over 4 degrees. I mean, you can argue, one scientist will pick another. We're at 1.2 today. And we're supposed to be caring about stopping at 1.5. Can we get there? The answer is yes. But we can't wait till 5 years before net zero 2050 to start doing that. The essential decade for action is this decade, now, 2020 to 2030. And what was, I think, significant about the meeting that I had in China was the fact that China, for the first time, signed on to a statement that says, US-China joint statement on climate crisis. First time they've called it a crisis. And within the body of the text, they talk about the urgency and the seriousness with which we need to do that. And for the first time, rather than just talking about peaking in 2030 and then going out in a plateau, they talk about taking further actions in the 20s and mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and the importance of all of us working together to engage on this. So you know, the oceans obviously get, in many ways, the worst of it, because everybody thinks, oh, that great big ocean, 3/4 of the planet. You know, you watch the tide go in and come out, and you look out across the horizon, and it's hard to say, oh my gosh, this massive body of water, miles deep in places, is not impregnable. But the fact is, we've been doing so much to it that scientists will tell you we're changing the chemistry now more of the ocean than in millions of years. And we're seeing things happen that we don't understand the full implications of. A few weeks ago, I read in the front page of one of our national newspapers a story about scientists worried about the melting of the Greenland ice sheet so much that the amount of cold water coming down from there to the south could split the Gulf Stream and completely and totally wreak havoc with the temperature and the climate that has been guided by the Gulf Stream for so long. So we're facing potential tipping points, the consequences of which we're not really certain. And the ocean, as we know, is the greatest sink there is, meaning it gobbles up this massive amount of carbon dioxide. But scientists have also measured the regurgitation of that carbon dioxide in places. And we actually don't know what the saturation point is of the ocean. Meanwhile, we're destroying the fauna and the life, the planets, the plants, plant life within the ocean seabed, in ways that destroy the ability to consume that carbon dioxide. We also know that 51% of the oxygen we breathe as human beings comes from the ocean, yet we're playing with the chemistry. So here's the bottom line. You can't solve the climate crisis without addressing the problem of the ocean because of its integrated criticality to the temperature regulation, to the amount of moisture in the air and so forth. And you cannot solve the ocean crisis without dealing with climate, because acidification is part of the challenge, and warming itself is a huge part of the challenge. It's also part of the challenge we feel on dry land, which isn't so dry when this massive amount of additional moisture because of the warming falls in the largest rainfalls and the biggest floods we have seen in years, 500-year floods that now happen with fairly regular order. So all I can say to everybody is we have to, Jane's right about ending no silos, no separation. Climate is ocean, ocean is climate, and we need a major leg of the Glasgow product that is addressing the ocean. And we need to face up to the fact that we have to cut emissions much, much faster. We have to get, even if we get to net zero 2050, we still have to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And scientists tell me that 50% of the emissions reductions we need to get are going to come from technologies that we don't yet have in the marketplace in commercial scale. I believe we'll get them. We're going to get there. The only issue is whether we're going to get there fast enough. And that's what Glasgow and the next months are all about. So the president's holding a summit. We will have major leaders, 40 major heads of state from around the world. 60 nations will take part in the listening session because there was a spillover of so much interest that Secretary Blinken and I will be having conversation with these ministers from the 60 countries that we can't literally fit in, only because a virtual conference across 12 time zones is really complicated to manage. But we want every nation at the table. I'm proud that the United States is back. We are going to step up. President Biden will announce major initiatives in order to do this, including finance, his commitment to get the $100 billion that we need to pay our arrearage, to pay forward, and to do what the United States needs to do to be part of this. So that's a critical component of what we're trying to achieve. And I look forward to working with all of you as we have. You know, the single most important thing for the ocean right now is to have a future that's free from carbon pollution. And I emphasize pollution. It is all pollution. And we used to have a principle of polluter pays, and we would actually have accountability. We're living in a world now of less accountability, not more. We need set-asides. We need other things. I'll talk about that when we get into the blue. But thank you, Jane, for your leadership, and thank you, all of you who are friends of the ocean, for having this conference and for including me.
Thank you, Special Envoy Kerry. I just love your passion as well as your knowledge. Very briefly, can you zoom in directly and immediately on what the U.S. is doing to leverage the power of the ocean?
Well, we're going to be very focused on it, Jane. We're going to look to the ocean, yes, to continue to help reduce pollution. But, you know, we've obviously got to take some steps to do specific things. So first, the potential of decarbonizing the shipping sector. The international shipping sector produces a level of greenhouse gas emissions that's the equivalent of the emissions of a major national economy. But the technologies that we need to decarbonize shipping are known to us. So they need investment and they need to be scaled up. It's incumbent on all nations to send a clear signal to the industry so they will make those investments in the near future. And ultimately will reduce emissions and will reduce costs for consumers at the same time. So to that end, I want to announce that in support of the global effort to keep us within reach of 1.5 degrees centigrade, and in support of global efforts to achieve net zero by no later than 2050, the United States is committing to work with countries in the International Maritime Organization to adopt the goal of achieving zero emissions from international shipping by 2050, and to adopt ambitious measures that will place the entire sector on a pathway to achieve this goal. Second, on the potential of offshore renewable energy, just last month, the United States announced a goal to deploy at least 30 gigawatts of offshore wind in the US by 2030. And I'm pleased that our colleague, Secretary Granholm, is going to be joining this afternoon to speak about the power of offshore renewable energy and its role in bending the emissions curve. Third, on the potential of nature-based solutions, our coastal blue carbon ecosystems, including seagrass beds in the salt marshes, sequester carbon. They also make us stronger in the face of climate impacts and by protecting our communities and our coastlines. So we're going to work to stop the loss of our coastal wetlands. And here in the US, we've been working hard to implement the directive to conserve at least 30% of US lands and waters by 2030. We're in, count us in on 30 by 30. And that was a highlight of President Biden's January executive order. On conservation and resilience, let me add that the US supports the 3 marine protected area proposals in the Southern Ocean under CAMLR. And we're now calling on CAMLR members to adopt these MPAs at the next meeting. And by the way, it's CAMLR's 40th anniversary. It's also a moment for us to say to ourselves, we're not just going to set aside these areas. We're going to enforce. We're going to get together and figure out how we have the critical level of visibility. And with satellite input now, we began this at the Our Oceans Conference. we can have tremendous visibility, transparency, and accountability. So I'm proud of the work we did in the Obama administration to achieve that. We have a lot of work yet to do to guarantee the enforcement. And then finally, I think, the island states understand this better than anybody. The challenges of ocean climate impacts as well as solutions are clear, and I'm grateful that Fiji, the Marshall Islands, the Seychelles are here today, and I want to note Fiji's leadership focusing on ocean issues during its COP23 presidency. I'm also pleased that we have the governor of Hawaii. David, thank you for being here. Appreciated exchanging a few words with you at the beginning. But you launched the first U.S. carbon neutrality target by 2045, no less. And over the past several years, it has been our states, 37 of them, plus the District of Columbia, that work to keep the United States basically in the Paris Agreement, notwithstanding what Donald Trump did. So today, I'm pleased to announce that the U.S. government is enhancing its engagement with the islands around the world through 3 mutually reinforcing initiatives. First, as I know Secretary Granholm will highlight, the Department of Energy is expanding its innovative work with island partners to decarbonize and achieve energy self-sufficiency. Second, our National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration will be working to enhance the capacity of island nations to integrate climate data and effective coastal and marine resource management strategies to support sustainable development. And third, the Department of State and NOAA and DOE are supporting the Local 2030 Island Network, which is, as you know, an innovative peer-to-peer network that connects U.S. islands with our fellow islands around the world on local solutions to common challenges. So I just end with this, and I apologize for going on, but I thought it was important to lay out comprehensively what we're going to be up to. Ambition. Ambition has to be the dominant word we all are thinking of and working on over the course of these next months through Glasgow, and then into the implementation over the next 10 years. We can do this. COP25 was known as the Blue COP, thanks to Chile's leadership. And I have no doubt that it was the first of many, but we just cannot overlook the impact, the magnitude of the ocean's impact on the promise, not only of ocean solutions, but of managing to be the green planet and behave in the green manner that we need to. So thank you for including me in this, and may we all have a little bit of luck, as well as the energy to tackle this challenge over these next months.
Thank you, Special Envoy Kerry. It's so exciting and energizing to hear all these wonderful commitments. I know that you are all about ambition, but you are also all about accountability and making promises that we will keep. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for joining us today.
My great privilege. Thank you.
Both the focus on national as well as international action, because we are all in this together.
Thank you, Jane. I apologize for leaving, but I actually have to go over to the White House and work on the summit. Thank you.
We understand. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.
To help further set the agenda for our upcoming speakers, we'll now zoom out and look at the road ahead as Special Envoy Kerry is focusing on from COP25, the world's first Blue COP hosted by Chile in 2019, to COP26 in Glasgow at the end of this year. COP25 was the first COP to mandate discussion of ocean-based mitigation and adaptation, and this was a critical step toward integrating ocean issues into the climate dialogue and advancing ocean climate action. To tell us about the vision for how we get from that first Blue COP through critical milestones like this week's summit, the G7 summit, the Convention on Biological Diversity meetings, to the COP26 in Glasgow later this year, it's now my deep pleasure to introduce the Right Honorable Lord Goldsmith of Richmond Park. Lord Goldsmith serves as Minister for Pacific and the Environment at the United Kingdom's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA. He is part of the UK's leadership team as they prepare to host COP26 later this year. He is also instrumental in thinking about how we can truly embed climate ambition across the global agenda, from UN processes to arenas like the G7, G20, and APEC. Lord Goldsmith, we are keen to hear about UK's vision for building climate ambition and the commitment ahead of COP26 and the role of ocean climate action in that vision. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jane. Thanks to our host. And it's a pleasure to be following Secretary Kerry, whose commitment really is beyond any question. It's a real pleasure to be invited to say a few words about how protecting and restoring the health of our ocean can help us address so many of the biggest challenges we face, including, of course, climate change. And as incoming presidents of COP26, we are making it a priority. I think it's hard to imagine, but just under a century ago, you could have seen vast pods of orcas and blue whales off the coast of Cornwall, where we'll be hosting the G7 leaders in June. Or in the late 15th century, the explorer John Cabot complained in a letter to King Henry Tudor that his ship's progress had been hampered by the sheer volume of cod off the coast of Newfoundland. 1836, it was reported that there was a shoal of sardines that extended 100 miles in a single compact body from Fowey to the Land's End. Well, as we know, industrial fishing has very quickly put an end to that. So the evidence couldn't really be any clearer than it is. In my lifetime, marine wildlife has more than halved. Today, a third of marine mammals are at risk of extinction. Over 90% of the world's marine stocks are fished unsustainably. And given that almost 1 billion people depend on fish as their main source of protein, this is both an ecological and a human tragedy. And just as quickly as we're denuding the ocean of life, we're filling it with rubbish, plastic in particular. Unless we act by 2025, ocean plastic will have trebled in just 10 years. Now, all this against the backdrop of an increasingly destabilized climate. It's estimated that the ocean has absorbed around 90% of the excess heat caused by human activity and up to 30% of human CO2 emissions. But there's only so long that the ocean can continue to act as a buffer. And as the ocean becomes warmer and more acidic, as we've just heard from Secretary Kerry, living systems will struggle to cope. It's a sobering thought that even if we manage to limit global warming to 2 degrees, we're still likely to lose 99% of coral reefs, on which we should remember a quarter of marine species depend. So there can be nothing more important really than turning this trajectory around. And it's absolutely right that this is now the UK's top international priority. And the good news is that we can turn things around if we want to, with political will. If we're to keep within the 1.5 degrees of warming, which we must, then we need to halve global emissions during this decade. And that requires a low carbon revolution, nothing less. And that is, in a sense, already underway. The cost of renewables has tumbled. Zero emissions vehicles on the cusp now of going mainstream. And the market in so many respects is racing ahead of the politics and ahead, in fact, of what anyone could have predicted. For example, in the 12 years since the banking crisis, the cost of solar power has dropped by nearly 90%. Nearly 80% of new generating capacity in 2019 was in wind, solar, biomass and waste, geothermal and hydro, not in fossil fuels. In the UK, we have the highest installed offshore wind capacity of any country in the world, with the expertise, supply chains and investment to match. And we plan to quadruple that to 40 gigawatts by 2030, producing enough clean energy to power many millions of homes and creating tens of thousands of jobs in coastal communities at the same time. And it's really fantastic to hear from Secretary Kerry that the US shares that ambition. Technology has an enormously important role to play. There's no doubt about that. But equally, on its own, we know it's not going to be enough. And that's why we need to increase our efforts both to protect and restore nature on an unprecedented scale on land and sea. And we have a very long way to go. And in truth, we haven't seen anything like the progress with nature protection or restoration as we have with the clean technology transition. But we know what to do, and we know it works. And we know that simply because we can measure the results. You take marine protected areas, for instance, when commercial fishing in the Atlantic and North Sea had to stop as a consequence of World War II, there was an immediate spike in fish populations. Or in New Zealand's Lee Marine Reserve, common predatory fish today are 6 times more abundant in the reserve than outside the reserve. In Spain, catches close to the Tabarca Marine Reserve were 85% higher after just 6 years of protection than anywhere else. Expanding marine protection by just 5% in the world's most overfished waters could improve global catches by at least 20%, which is really a win-win by any measure. So that's why we're coordinating and co-leading a global alliance to protect at least 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030. And I was very excited to hear Secretary Kerry reaffirm President Biden's commitment to protect 30% of US land and water by 2030. And we really look forward to working with you all to raise global ambition, especially for the 2/3 of the global ocean that lies beyond national jurisdiction. The magic of focusing on helping nature recover is that in doing so, we're also tackling a whole bunch of other issues: hunger, poverty, pollution, and of course, climate change. In New Orleans, for instance, wetland restoration is protecting communities against flooding and creating jobs and storing carbon and helping species like the majestic Mississippi sandhill crane recover. I'd go further than that and say it is not possible to address these issues properly without a focus on nature. Globally, we believe nature-based solutions could provide around 1/3 of the most cost-effective solution to climate change. And every dollar invested in, for example, mangroves, salt marshes, kelp, and so on, can pay its way up to 6 times over, protecting coastlines and supporting livelihoods as well. But despite that huge potential, nature attracts less than 3% of global climate finance, and less than 1% of ODA is allocated to supporting a sustainable ocean economy. And that makes no sense at all. And it's one of the key things that we absolutely have to shift. So we're putting nature at the heart of our G7 and COP26 presidencies, building alliances committed to shifting the immense power of the market away from destruction and towards sustainability. At the end of 2019, the Prime Minister of the UK announced that we would be doubling our international climate finance to 11.6 billion. He's since committed, even more importantly in my view, he's committed us to spending at least £3 billion of that on nature-based solutions to climate change. And we're urging other donor countries to do similarly. And on the back of that commitment, we're developing a pipeline of really ambitious and exciting programs, including a new £500 million Blue Planet Fund, which will support some of the world's most fragile environments and the communities that depend profoundly on them. It'll help countries to establish and improve marine protected areas, big and small. It'll provide focused protection for particularly important and fragile habitats like corals. It will support restoration of coastal ecosystems like mangroves and seagrass and kelp. It'll tackle unsustainable industrial and illegal fishing, and it'll help fight pollution of the marine environment. But it builds upon work that we're already doing to support the ocean, from efforts to tackle plastic pollution to mangrove restoration in Madagascar, Indonesia, Latin America, Caribbean, and the glorious Blue Belt program, which now protects an area of ocean larger than India around our British overseas territories. But because public money alone is not going to be enough, we need to get private finance flowing by accelerating progress on financial disclosures and high integrity carbon markets. And we're calling also on the big multilateral development banks, like the World Bank, for example, to mainstream nature across their entire portfolios and to support countries in fulfilling their commitments to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature. Because there's no point having a little bit of investment here and there in nature or climate if the rest of the portfolio, if the rest of the investments are taking us in the opposite direction. And for years, that patchwork, compartmentalized approach has been justified on the belief that we have a choice: poverty versus climate, climate versus nature. But we know that in the real world, those barriers simply do not exist. It's often said that we need to weave the environment into our economics, but as Professor Dasgupta's seminal study makes very clear, That's the wrong way round. Ultimately, all our economic activity is derived from nature. Without nature, we have nothing. So unless we learn how to value valuable things like ecosystems and to attach a cost to waste, pollution, plunder, our efforts are going to be in vain. And that really is the crux of it. The need to reconcile our lives and our economies with the natural world on which all of us depend. And no government is doing enough yet, but the UK will continue to step up, and the support and leadership that the new US administration is clearly willing and able to provide can and must be game-changing. We have absolutely everything we need to make this the year we fundamentally reset our relationship with nature. And if we work together, all of us, governments, scientists, businesses, NGOs, civil society, young, old, north, south, east, west, developing and developed, I have absolutely no doubt that we can. So I want to thank you for inviting me today and for all that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Lord Goldsmith. I really love the integrated view that you have presented that's so eloquent and so holistic, combining great ambition with also drawing attention to the importance of nature-based solutions, be they on land or the coast and the ocean, in understanding that they are all interconnected. The focus on finance is critically important, as you well know. And thank you for highlighting Professor Parthadas Gupta's Economics of Biodiversity report for the UK Treasury. It really is, I think, the way forward. And thank you so much for what the UK is doing and for your presence here today. We are very grateful and look forward to achieving this great vision that you have articulated. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
As I mentioned before, the ocean can provide us with new ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and raise global ambition on climate action. Ocean-based mitigation solutions, from increasing responsible offshore renewable energy to protecting and restoring coastal blue carbon ecosystems, can support the climate ambition of countries in their NDCs and other national climate plans. At the same time, ocean-based adaptation efforts, from creating protected areas that defend coastlines to climate-ready fisheries management, can build the resilience of ecosystems and communities and safeguard the livelihoods and cultures of those on the front lines of ocean climate impacts. Just as our one ocean connects us all, these ocean solutions are also interconnected, often providing benefits. So as we dive into hearing more about each of these solutions, I'm honored to introduce the leaders of two large ocean states who are demonstrating what ocean climate action really means at the national and the international level. I will begin with Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama of Fiji and introduce him first and ask him to make his remarks. Prime Minister Bainimarama has served as the Prime Minister of Fiji since 2007. Widely recognized for his dedication to addressing ocean climate change, Prime Minister Bainimarama was the first world leader to ratify the Paris Agreement, and he served as president of COP23. He received the UN Environment Programme's Champion of the Earth Award in 2020, the UN's highest environmental honor. The floor is yours, Prime Minister. We are all ears. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. Jane. Elizabeth Cousins, President of the United Nations Foundation, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, Secretary John Kerry, the head of Oceans Conservancy, Janice Sells Jones, and all my fellow friends of the ocean, Bula Vinaka, as we say in Fiji. Thank you for having me. Your Excellencies, in advance of President Biden's Leaders Summit on Climate, I want to start by saying this. After the past 4 years, it is a breath of fresh air to have the United States of America as not an adversary, but an ally in the fight to save our planet. But this is not 2016 anymore. The state of the world is much more dire and require much more ambitious plans and tangible commitments if there's any hope in achieving net zero emissions by 2050. At this summit, some of the world's most vulnerable, we in small island developing states, were left sorely underrepresented. We, the tiny carbon emitters, plagued by outside climate devastation. We, the victims, battered by superstorm and superstorm. We, the vulnerable peoples who are forced to relocate entire communities to escape the rising seas. We, the nearly 60 countries and territories whose very existence is threatened by the climate emergency, requires access to finance to urgently build our climate resilience. We were largely relegated to the kids' table, with only 3 among our ranks invited to address the summit itself, none from the South Pacific or the Indian Ocean. On its face, it may seem to make sense to focus so much on inviting the major emitters. After all, just 17 countries are responsible for 80% of the world's carbon emissions. But turning a blind eye to the world's most climate vulnerable states, we are not looking forward, we're turning back. If the Biden administration was to show that it truly sees the developing world as more than its predecessor, refraining from vulgar descriptors isn't going to be enough. Our plight needs to be heard, it needs to be seen, and it needs to be met with tangible action. Just because our carbon footprint is small does not mean we aren't filled with big ideas and perspective. Nowhere is that more true than when it comes to the vitality of our oceans. After all, we may be small islands, but we are large ocean states with exclusive economic zones that cover huge expanses of our seas. For generations, our way of life, our national identity, our culture, and our traditions, and our economic vigor have been forged by the ocean. And today, we are leading the way with big ideas, big innovations, and big commitments to protecting our ocean, not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of the world faced with a climate emergency and for future generations. However, today our ocean is faced with a multitude of threats, from overfishing to pollution, to habitat degradation and destruction. The oceans are in dire and worsening conditions, all of which are compounded further by the devastating effects of climate change. But we can also find immense hope in the ocean's immense resilience. That resilience starts with marine protected areas and through wonderful initiatives like the 30 by 30, which Fiji is working with the United Kingdom. Securing a global network of these marine parks and actively and aggressively protecting them from harmful activities can provide our ocean with the breathing room it needs to regenerate and restore itself to be our planet's most valuable climate assets. And for the climate-ravaged coastal communities in small island developing states like in Fiji, these highly protected areas will be a godsend, benefiting coastal economies, allowing for sustainable livelihoods and ecosystems. That's why today, Fiji is pleased to announce that we will join the efforts of other blue leaders in calling for 2 concrete goals to strengthen the ocean resilience to climate change, putting the world on the path to net zero. First, we strongly support a new global target to protect at least 30% of the global ocean by 2030 through a network of fully protected marine areas, the next Convention of Biological Diversity. And second, we call for the rapid conclusion of a robust new United Nations thread to establish, conserve, and protect marine biodiversity in the ocean beyond our national jurisdiction. The science is clear. These 2 big blue ideas are the best way to safeguard our ocean and build its resilience to climate change. I call on all our leaders from the Pacific and all around the world to join me in realizing these essential protections. As my friend UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres reminded the world as he visited Fiji to see the impact of climate change firsthand, this is indeed the fight for our lives. I hope you, Secretary Kerry, and President Biden himself will follow in his footsteps and accept my invitation to join us in Fiji this August as Pacific leaders meet for our summit of our own. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. It is always such a joy to hear you speak. Thank you for your continued, persistent, and very, very effective leadership. We are truly grateful for that. Our next speaker is President Kabua, the Republic of the Marshall Islands. He is having connectivity issues and has been trying to join. In the spirit of being prepared, he has provided a video for us. And so lacking our ability to connect with him directly, we still have the benefit of hearing his remarks. Please play our video from President Kabua, who is the the President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands since 2020. Previously, he was appointed representative of the Wolfo Atoll and has served as Minister of Health, Minister of Internal Affairs, and Minister in Assistance to the President. The President is continuing a long tradition of true climate leadership by the Marshall Islands, which formed the High Ambition Coalition in the run-up negotiations to the Paris Agreement in 2015, helping to jumpstart and secure key elements of the deal, including the 1.5 degree temperature goal and the net zero global emissions pathway by the second half of the century. Thank you, President Kabua, for your leadership. Please play our video.
Thank you, Excellencies, and I bring you warm greetings of Yoke from the Marshall Islands. It is important that the global community have a closer focus on the relationship between oceans and climate change. I can speak from experience as a leader of a nation where the ocean is more than 99% of our vast territory. And for the Pacific Islands region, our collective ocean area is more than twice the size of Europe. So we don't think of ourselves as small island states, but instead we are large ocean nations. And while for many other nations, oceans are an afterthought, for us, they are priority number one. And as large ocean states, we are more than just moral voices, but our policies can have a direct impact on the shape of global oceans actions. Today is a key opportunity to consider oceans and the opportunities and challenges posed by climate change. While some of the most dramatic images of climate impacts are of the impacts of sea level rise on low-lying island nations like mine, climate-driven impacts like warming oceans and acidifications are no less dangerous. The threat is not just upon Pacific Islanders, but the world as a whole. Without a dramatic course correction and political will, world leaders collectively will fail in our responsibility for global oceans. Today, this week, and through the upcoming Conference of Parties, the Paris Agreement must realize increased effort. In 2015, negotiators who crafted this pact realized the world was falling short of what was needed, and they created a long-term vehicle to frame stronger efforts. In the Paris Agreement, we all agreed to sit down together and to sit down again and again to spare no effort in responding to science and the most vulnerable among us, my nation and other islands included. But those are all words that have been repeated by leaders and diplomats many times before. Given the urgent alarm on both climate and oceans, what matters now is what we do, not what we say. And I will share what the Marshall Islands and other island nations are bringing to the discussion. The Marshall Islands is one of the world's largest shipping registries, and international transport must play its own sectoral role in sharp cuts to emissions. While there is agreement through the IMO to achieve greater efficiency in greenhouse gas emissions from new and future vessels, these efforts won't be enough. The Marshall Islands and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific have introduced a proposal for a cost levy on maritime transport, which applies to all, and which will fund greater innovation and effort on emissions cuts in the maritime sector, while also addressing vulnerable nations. We look forward to robust discussions at the IMO to ensure the maritime sector acts at the scale and speed needed to play a role in strong global action. And while we push for action abroad, we are also seeking to transform our own domestic fleet towards low carbon technology. In the Pacific Islands region, we also host over half a world commercial supply of tuna fish, which is a key source of global food security. Even as other stocks around the world are overfished, our key stocks remain healthy. The Marshall Islands and our Pacific Islands neighbors are the world's largest certified sustainable purse seine tuna fisheries because of our strong island leadership and ongoing negotiations with the superpowers who fish our waters. A decade ago, we worked together as island nations under our own treaty to stand up to superpower fishing our waters and rewrite the script on global tuna. We did this so our future generations are not robbed of one of their only economic lifelines. To protect our fisheries, we still have much to do. Illegal fishing remains a grave threat to our security. And climate impacts, in particular warming ocean temperatures, pose a threat to known tuna migration patterns. We are working with technical agencies in our region to gain a more precise understanding of the future fisheries and seek to develop policy responses to respond to the science. I have only taken a few minutes to provide examples of how island nations serve as ocean stewards and how leadership must be proven through concrete action and results. The world's oceans are already facing a grave crisis, and the added climate challenge makes this task seem nearly impossible. But if history is our guide, it is at just moments where the true character of global leadership is revealed. Como data.
As we have heard, large ocean states like the Marshall Islands and Fiji are truly leading by example. Thank you so much, President Kabua. And thank you both for helping set the course for an ambitious outcome in Glasgow, as well as in related fora like the IMO. And now I would like to turn to our next panel, featuring other maritime states that are also critical to the implementation of multilateral ocean-based climate solutions. Our first speaker in this panel is Minister Svein Rotevatn, appointed as Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway in January of 2020. Norway has long been an ocean champion, and most recently leading the pioneering high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy that inter alia did the fundamental work on the potential for ocean-based solutions to climate change, helping to lay the groundwork for our discussions today. Our second speaker is Mr. Hideki Saito, Deputy Director General for Engineering Affairs in the Maritime Bureau of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism of Japan. Mr. Saito was also previously the chair of the Marine Environment Protection Committee at the International Maritime Organization, IMO, the global body responsible for advancing sustainable shipping. Minister Rotevatn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this important event, focusing on sustainable ocean solutions in a climate resilient future. We urgently need sustainable ocean policies to preserve the ocean as the life source of our planet, to nourish human well-being, and to build sustainable economies. To strive for healthy oceans is at the core of Norway's identity as an ocean nation. To build a sustainable ocean economy is simply essential for our future. On the domestic arena, Norway gives high priority to ocean protection, sustainable ocean management, as well as ocean-based climate solutions. On the international arena, we partner up with countries willing to lead on the transformations for a sustainable ocean economy. It is clearly demonstrated by Prime Minister Solberg's initiative to establish the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. In the Paris Agreement, we agreed to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. To reach this goal, we depend on a healthy ocean, an ocean that can maintain its fundamental part in the global climate system to absorb CO2, balance temperature, and control weather. The Ocean Panel has identified several actions to protect and restore marine and coastal ecosystems. We need to unite forces to increase the extent of critical ecosystems, such as mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes, kelp beds, sand dunes, reefs, and deep ocean ecosystems. This will benefit climate mitigation and resilience, while providing multiple benefits for livelihoods and food security. Further, ocean-based solutions for emission cuts are substantial and need to be rapidly implemented using the full potential of a global sustainable ocean economy. Our response to climate change will require scaling up of renewable energy and offshore wind power. Progressive environmental policies offer great opportunities for a growing industry. Hywind Tampen in the North Sea will be the world's biggest floating offshore wind farm. This project would not have been possible without strong climate policies, such as our CO2 tax, being a part of the European emission trading system, and support from the state-owned enterprise Enova. Zero-emission shipping is growing rapidly in Norway. The number of zero-emission ships in operation in our waters are growing year by year. The types of ships and operations which can introduce zero-emission solutions is expanding. Batteries, hydrogen, ammonia, and biofuels have been and are being introduced as we speak. This has happened because the government has established a target to cut emissions from domestic shipping and fishing by 50% by 2030. The emission target is coupled with strengthened policies through requirements, incentives, and financial schemes in order to ensure that we will indeed meet the target. The same process will need to happen on a global scale through the International Maritime Organization. Norway actively supports the ongoing process to adopt further energy efficiency measures this June, but the IMO will need to go further. The next package of measures for substantial cuts in greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping need to initiate a fuel shift by introducing carbon-free fuel and zero-emission solutions. This will enable a strengthened IMO climate ambition for 2050 to be established, as well as needed follow-up actions. The green transition needs to include everyone. In addition to global regulations at the IMO, a global transition to zero-emission shipping should include assistance to developing countries. Norway is doing that through the IMO program Green Voyage 2050, and we welcome others on board. Norway aims to work with countries like the United States and other climate partners at the IMO to succeed on the zero-emission pathway for shipping. Finally, the climate and the oceans needs a successful COP26. I will conclude by encouraging the countries that have not yet submitted enhanced nationally determined contributions to do so. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. And thank you for Norway's leadership. Mr. Saito, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Jane. First of all, I'd like to extend our largest appreciation to the Friends of the Ocean and Climate and especially U.S. Special Envoy Kelly for organizing this important event just in advance of the Leaders Summit on Climate. I also would like to express my gratitude for giving me an excellent opportunity to make a remark on the reduction of greenhouse gas or GHG emission from international shipping, which is a crucially important issue for the world. In listening to the remarks made by the previous speakers, I'm strongly encouraged by their strong commitments to take further actions to decarbonize the ocean and international shipping. Likewise, Japan had set a national target to achieve carbon neutral by 2050. With this national target in mind, we are intensifying to develop the first ever safe and commercial ready ocean-going zero-emission ship with aim of delivering this ship to the market at the latest by 2028. We believe that this would surely contribute to accelerate the transition to decarbonization of the global shipping industries. As one of major shipping and shipbuilding countries in the world, Japan is committed to lead the decarbonization of shipping through continuous improvement of its research and development and, of course, innovation. At the same time, I'd like to emphasize that the international shipping is a global business. Given this fact, Japan is convinced that it is crucial to accelerate the global efforts involving all stakeholders on board in order to address the climate change in the international shipping sector. In light of this, I believe that the International Maritime Organization, IMO, which is a United Nations specialized body headquartered in London, is capable of establishing a global and fair framework regulating the ships throughout the world and further incentivizing the industry to the decarbonization. I today joined the session as a Japanese representative, but you may be aware that I have played another role at the IMO, namely I work at the IMO as the chair of Marine Environment Protection Committee, in which member governments negotiate the international environmental rules and regulations for international shipping. I am not going to talk on the details of the discussion at the IMO, but I can tell you this time, as Japan's head official in charge of maritime environmental policy, Japan is strongly committed to contribute to the IMO to deliver effective international legal frameworks which fulfill the world's ambitious goals, and this can be done only together with the global partners. Our motivation in this regard is very close to what has been addressed by many speakers, including the one from the US Special Envoy Kelly. In closing my statement, again, Japan would like to extend our largest appreciation to the United States for the initiative today. In close cooperation with a number of our partners here, Japan looks forward to enlarging our initiative that we share today to the global level, and we hope that the discussion today will be duly recognized at the IMO and serve to renew momentum for the global action towards zero emissions of the world's shipping industries. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Rutuboten and Mr. Saito. I trust that our audience today is hearing this strong drumbeat of ambition, the power of ocean-based climate solutions, and the importance of multilateral action through the UNFCCC, the IMO, and regional initiatives. Thank you all. We'd now like to change focus a bit and look at how that ambition and those commitments are manifested at the national and subnational levels. Developing a holistic response that includes broad participation from all levels of government and all sectors of society is critical. This includes regional, local governments, the private sector, financial sector, youth and indigenous voices, and civil society, among others. At the same time, building such broad constituencies requires solutions that are multifaceted, solutions that simultaneously reduce emissions and build resilience, create jobs, protect iconic places, and support communities. We're looking for win-win-win solutions, and thankfully we are hearing more, and I look forward to hearing additional ones. Joining me to talk about what this looks like on the ground are two very experienced leaders in these areas. First, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Secretary of Energy of the United States, Jennifer Granholm. Secretary Granholm is leading initiatives that will help the U.S. transition to a clean energy economy that delivers for climate and for people and their communities. Prior to her nomination as Energy Secretary, Secretary Granholm was the first woman elected governor of the state of Michigan, serving 2 terms, 2003 to 2011. She was also the first woman elected Attorney General of Michigan, serving as the state's top law enforcement officer from 1998 to 2002. I am also pleased to introduce Governor David Ige of the great state of Hawaii. Governor Ige has served as governor since 2014. Before that, he served for almost 30 years in the Hawaii House of Representatives and the Hawaii Senate. He is the first governor in the United States of Okinawan descent. Under Governor Ige's leadership, Hawaii has been a leader on climate action, on ocean action, and on the SDGs generally, leading to some of the most ambitious climate targets in the United States. So to begin our conversation, as we heard from Secretary Kerry and other esteemed speakers, the ocean plays a vital but often under-recognized role in tackling the climate crisis. Innovative technologies have vast potential to transform ocean energy and the blue economy to achieve lower emissions while also powering remote communities and islands with clean, renewable energy. Secretary Granholm, what do you see as the opportunities and challenges with regard to the ocean?
Well, thank you, Jane, and hello, everyone. It is such an honor to join such a distinguished group of leaders from around the world, many, including Governor Ige, on the front lines of climate change. So if you give me just a few minutes, I'll tell you where I think our focus has to be. So first of all, as Secretary Kerry noted, this is a crisis, and we will be the first to acknowledge that the United States spent the last 4 years largely avoiding it. But that ends under President Biden's leadership. We are all in on making the case to make this happen. We want to make up for lost time and then some, but we also know that the only way to reach our shared net zero targets is for us all to move together. And we know that along the way, the good news is that we can create millions of good paying jobs. And it starts with deploying technology. We can get most of the way to 100% clean energy just through current technology. But to achieve and even exceed our goals, we have to do more to lower costs, to improve performance of these technologies, and to develop new technologies altogether. And that's why President Biden has called for more than $500 billion of investment in research and development so that we can get to work unlocking massive breakthroughs in areas like ocean energy. President Biden actually wants us to build back bluer. And here at the Department of Energy, with our 17 national laboratories, we're going to play a key role. We already see incredible potential in water. Last month, we announced a joint agency goal to deploy 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, which is enough to power about 10 million homes while cutting 78 million metric tons of carbon emissions. We'll be able to do so much more as we push the envelope in this ocean energy space. And I'm talking about, for example, the designs for floating offshore wind turbines that we are working up. I'm talking about the tests that we can do on wave energy through PAC-WAVE, which will be our first grid-connected, full-scale marine test facility, rivaled only by the European Marine Energy Center in Scotland. I'm talking about the grants that we can give out to businesses that are eager to help even the most remote communities decarbonize using hydropower. Places like Igiagig, Alaska, which now gets half of its power year-round from a single river current energy device, even through the cold of winter. Or, of course, everyone knows about Kodiak Island, Alaska, which is 100% powered by hydropower. And of course, so much is happening to harness wave and tidal power for electricity. We're even trying to figure out how to harness wave energy to power desalination systems with our Waves to Water prize. It's one of several efforts that we're spearheading to further research and development in water desalination. So all told, we have a water power technologies office in the Department of Energy, and we boast a portfolio of over 130 awards and grants for marine energy projects. And they are thrilled for next week's virtual marine energy collegiate competition, which is challenging young scientific and engineering minds to push us across the cutting edge of marine energy technologies. So we at DOE are big believers in the sustainable blue economy, and we will continue to invest in it. But transitioning to clean energy, while it is an essential step toward addressing the climate crisis, we know it's not the only step that we've got to take, because there are consequences for the carbon that we will emit until the transition is complete. So we have to build resilience, especially within communities that are adjacent to the water, in the middle of the water, from Maine to Alaska to Hawaii to Puerto Rico, Guam. We have tens of millions of citizens facing escalating vulnerabilities to climate change, supercharged natural disasters. And that's why we've been creating blueprints for island and community transitions to clean energy. So in 2008, long before I was Energy Secretary, and a few years before Governor Ige became Governor Ige, DOE was working with Hawaii to establish the state's clean energy initiative, setting an actionable goal for Hawaii to achieve 100% clean energy. Well, that same collaborative spirit is going to power the Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Project, which we announced selections for just a few hours ago. And what this is we will be providing 11 frontline communities across Alaska, Hawaii, Maine, North Carolina, with the resource support that they need to transform their energy systems through added renewable capacity and to ramp up their resilience against these extreme climate events. So today, I'm so pleased to announce the launch of a new global initiative, which is going to be led by the Department of Energy, which is the Energy Transitions Initiative Global. And through this initiative, the Department of Energy will work with the State Department and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, it's also called NOAA, to support our island partners as you pursue locally driven transitions to clean, resilient energy. We want to be your partner. We want to collaborate, if you are willing, with island nations around the world to include those in the local 2030 island network, which is already working to advance community-driven energy solutions to make the islands more resilient. We'll work with all partners from the Caribbean to the Pacific to craft climate action strategies that center their cultures and their own development challenges. So, my friends, in order to meet these ambitious goals that we are setting, we need to be as relentless as the water itself. As the saying goes, a river cuts through rock, not because of its power, but because of its persistence. And we need to work boldly together because another saying goes, individually, we are one drop, but together we are an ocean. So let us together be as persistent as the river and as collective as the ocean. Let's be bold together. Let's get back on track to conquering this climate crisis together and creating a safer, more sustainable, more prosperous future for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Really wonderful to hear. Governor Ige, Hawaii has set itself an ambitious target of generating 100% of its electricity from clean, renewable sources and being carbon negative by 2045. How do ocean-based solutions fit into your plans for meeting that target? And how can your efforts drive and support multinational efforts like those we just heard about on clean shipping or ocean-based energy, and vice versa?
Aloha, and thank you so much for inviting Hawaii to be part of this so important dialogue. I'd just like to start by expressing how very thankful I am for Special Envoy Kerry's recognition of Hawaii's leadership, from our work on energy and climate to our deep collaboration through Aloha with islands, federal partners, and leaders around the world, such as through the Local 2030 Islands Network. I'd also like to thank Secretary Granholm for her inspiration and energy, which has been so lacking from the US for the past 4 years. American islands are stepping up together with US islands like Guam and Puerto Rico in joining the network, in addition to the Marshall Islands and Fiji and other island economies. Secretary Granholm had announced the Energy Transitions Initiative and the selection of advanced clean transportation, mobility, and other projects here in the state of Hawaii. We are so excited to be a part of that work. Hawaii has a long history, as the Secretary had noted, with the Department of Energy on advancing our clean energy goals. From the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, which is into its second decade, to our efforts today to promote projects and programs such as these that integrate environmental justice and a greater role for community voices in creating a better Hawaii. As you probably are aware, Hawaii was the first state in this nation to commit to 100% renewable power by 2045. And we're excited that the President Biden is looking to raise that ambition for the entire country. As an electrical engineer and a businessman, I understood the future is 100% renewable. And even though we do not know the exact technology mix and the timing of that future, we do know that to optimize our investments and rise to the challenge of this climate crisis, we had to make this our North Star. Hawaii sends billions of dollars each year to import fossil fuel, and making the transition to renewable indigenous resources for power generation will allow us to keep more of that money at home, thereby improving our economy, creating jobs, improving the environment, and improving energy security for all the people of Hawaii. It also has meant devoting more of our limited land to energy generation and transmission, which requires more innovative and collaborative solutions to better steward our lands for our multiple needs. Hawaii is a proud partner in Papahanaumokuakea, the National Marine Monument, the largest protected area in the United States. And in 2016, at the World Conservation Congress, I launched Hawaii's Sustainable Hawaii Initiative, committing to protect 30% of our oceans and 30% of our critical watersheds throughout the state of Hawaii. We know it's about a balance of conservation and innovation that will solve and meet this energy crisis. We look to the ocean as a way to help us, from wave energy, as Secretary Granholm had mentioned, to ocean thermal energy conversion. Hawaii has numerous innovative and experimental technologies underway with business and governments from around the world. We also are excited about President Biden's announcement to target 30 gigawatts of offshore wind power as Hawaii's current projections to get to 100% clean electricity includes offshore wind as a critical part of the solution. Our effort around our energy policy laid the foundation for collaboration on others' goals as well. Learning from our experience of bringing cross-sector leaders together to work through our energy challenges, we evolved into what is now known as the Aloha Plus Challenge, which is our homegrown framework for collaborations across multiple goals. As the global community developed the Sustainable Development Goals, the Aloha Plus Challenge approach easily aligned with the UN SDGs and lends itself to being a framework for localizing the SDGs, especially to island contexts. In Hawaii, we excel at partnerships, working across sectors to do what needs to be done. Our goals rely on partnerships across governments, sectors, industries, and most importantly, communities, bringing aloha from the heart into the heart of difficult conversations that we all must have to change the trajectory of Hawaii and change the trajectory of the world. Hawaii has set a goal for itself to aim not only to reduce emissions to zero, but to go below zero as quickly as practical, but not later than 2045. Indeed, we have a greenhouse gas net negative goal that is enshrined in our state laws. Like our goal for clean power, we know that not only eliminating emissions, but removing greenhouse gases will be required to keep the average global temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius as much as we can. Even a temporary exceeding of 1.5 degrees C will result in unabated sea level rise, ocean acidification, and heat-enhanced storms affecting all of our communities. We hope the world will follow suit on this goal and in implementing it. Through global cooperation and the leadership of the US, UK, and so many other countries gathered here today, we can tackle the climate crisis together as to make as quickly as practical a reality for all of us. We can work together better through the alignment of local, state, national, and international action. Hawaii is the most isolated island community on the planet, 2,500 miles from the nearest landmass. And like islands around the world, we see the impacts of climate change and sea level rise in a real way. However, we do not see it as isolation. The ocean connects us all. From 2013 to 2019, the Polynesian Voyaging Society sailed a traditional Hawaiian voyaging canoe named Hokulea around the world to carry this message that the ocean connects us all and calls us to care for, to malama, our island Earth. The people of Hawaii are deeply tied to the ocean through culture, traditions, practices, sustenance, and our economy. Islands are at the frontier of climate change. Island people understand this, and islands are the models for global solutions because we are all the people of island Earth. Now more than ever, it is such connections grounded in a commitment to collaboration, stewardship, and justice that will lead the world to cooperate as we move into the climate decade to address the issues of our time, the climate crisis. The coronavirus has been a wake-up call that we are a globalized society now, where our actions have direct impact on each other, and has shown that with a united front, we are able to come together to address these crises.
Thank you, Secretary Granholm, and mahalo nui loa, Governor Ige, for your leadership and for your exciting, concrete plans to make ocean climate ambition a reality. This on the ground, in the water, and in the heart experience and perception that we see in Hawaii and through the Department of Energy, combined with the active partnership with and support for islands that we've heard about already, provide a great platform for sharing experiences and knowledge, and will help accelerate climate solutions. Staying with this theme of implementing solutions and providing real-world examples that can be replicated, we turn now to our third and final panel, yet another group of exceptional ocean climate leaders from countries that are acting now on climate mitigation and adaptation. I'm excited about the ways in which they are employing a range of ocean-based climate solutions to reduce emissions and build resilience, but also to sustain thriving coastal communities through healthy fisheries, vibrant tourism, and the creation of new jobs in the ocean, in the clean ocean economy. Our first speaker is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile, Mr. Andrés Alemán. Minister Alemán has served in this role since 2020. Previously, he served as Chile's Minister of Defense and as an elected senator. Chile has long been a leading voice for ocean climate action internationally. As the president of the UNFCCC COP, Chile convened the world's first Blue COP that we've already heard mentioned a number of times, setting the stage for an ongoing focus on ocean-based climate solutions in that key forum. Like the other countries represented here, Chile has also walked the walk on the ocean and took action in its own waters to protect critical areas. We're also honored to welcome Belgium's Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Justice and Minister of the North Sea, Mr. Vincent van Quickenborne, to this panel. Mr. van Quickenborne has served as Minister of Justice and the North Sea since 2020. Having also previously served as a mayor, he is well equipped to understand how global ambition translates to local action and affects local communities. Belgium, too, has demonstrated significant leadership on ocean issues, initiating the Blue Leaders Group of countries to support a new high seas treaty and protection of critical marine areas, as well as advancing offshore wind development ambition on shipping emissions. Our third speaker in this segment is Costa Rica's Minister of Environment and Energy, Andrea Mesa Murillo. Minister Mesa is an expert in sustainable development with more than 20 years of experience in formulating public policies and executing projects. Since 2015, she has served as Director of the Climate Change Directorate of the Ministry of Environment and Energy, where she coordinated the technical formulation of the National Decarbonization Plan and the National Adaptation Plan. She has also been instrumental in Costa Rica's cutting-edge work to include protection of blue carbon ecosystems in its NDC to help both mitigate and adapt to climate change. Finally, we'll have a pre-recorded message from the Minister of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment, Flavien Jobert of Seychelles. One of the downsides of not being together in person is that we have to manage events across many time zones. It's currently just after 1 a.m. in Seychelles, so Minister Jobert, understandably, can't be with us live. But we are grateful for his efforts to send us his thoughts, particularly given Seychelles' history as a timeless champion on both ocean and climate issues for many years. They have helped us understand how inextricably linked these two are. Minister Jobert himself has a deep background on environmental issues with degrees in environmental studies and environmental analysis. He has worked for 24 years in public service in the Environment Ministry, and as CEO of Seychelles National Parks Authority, and most recently as Chief Executive of the Seychelles Landscape and Waste Management Agency. Seychelles continues to set an example, most recently through their work to include protecting coastal wetlands as part of the country's updated NDC to the Paris Agreement. I look forward to his remarks following our other three speakers. Mr. Aleman, you have the floor. We're anxious to hear your words. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Jane, for the moderation of this panel, and of course, for your kind words towards Chile. And let me say, to start, that the ocean, as we all know, the ocean fulfills key functions to support life on Earth and is essential for the development of humankind through its socioeconomic, climatic, and environmental role. As was remembered here, as presidency of COP25, the Blue COP, Chile promoted the Blue Agenda, putting the ocean at the center of formal and informal negotiations, underlining its role as a relevant climate regulator and carbon sink. Marine protected areas play a key part for achieving that goal. And I want just to share with you that Chile has by now 41 marine protected areas, which cover 43% of our exclusive economic zone, currently ranking 6th globally in total MPA coverage. Scientific evidence has proven that MPAs play a relevant role in protecting biodiversity, and if located in the right places, they emerge as an important tool to protect blue carbon ecosystems. For example, Chile designated a fully protected MPA around the Diego Ramirez Archipelago, located at the southern end of the continent shelf of the American continent, offering protection to kelp forest ecosystems that provide nurseries for young marine organisms and lock away carbon dioxide. Then, Rapa Nui Marine Protected Area around Easter Island is nearly the size of mainland Chile and is one of the world's largest MPAs. It now provides protection to cold water coral reefs, blue whales, hammerhead sharks, and 142 species found nowhere else in the world, while safeguarding local interests and needs. And then Chile has also proposed the establishment of an MPA in Antarctica together with Argentina. This would protect the ocean around the Antarctic Peninsula, home to an incredible biodiversity, including endangered species of penguins, whales, seals, krill, and small crustaceans, which serve as the foundation of the ocean's food chain. Today, scientific evidence shows us that it's necessary to be more ambitious in terms of ocean conservation, which is why Chile is committed to adopting the goal of protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030 under the Convention of Biological Diversity. We believe the international community must agree on this new target at the upcoming meeting in China later this year. Negotiations are also underway at the United Nations to finalize a new high seas treaty focused on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity beyond national jurisdictions. Chile will pursue a treaty that allows the international community to establish comprehensive, cross-sectoral, fully and highly protected marine areas on the high seas. I wish just to come back to an idea I launched in an event organized by the Wilson Center in March to consider building an alliance specifically in terms of supporting the creation and management of MPAs in the world. It is a very simple and concrete idea that will have an impact in ocean diversity, in fisheries, and in addressing climate change. The notion of implementing and supporting the management of MPAs is a field where international cooperation can positively come together. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias, Minister. And now we turn to Minister Van Quickenborne. We look forward to your remarks, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Jane. Excellencies, friends of the oceans, it is, of course, for me also a great pleasure to be able to participate today in this important event devoted to ocean and climate nexus. Like as Special Envoy Kerry has said earlier on, climate is ocean and ocean is climate. So Belgium is grateful to you, Special Envoy Kerry, for convening this event and for your outstanding leadership on both ocean and climate issues that has spanned decades. And Jane, as previous speakers have noted, our oceans are the key factor in the climate system, and they can offer plenty of solutions to tackle climate change. If we do not safeguard our oceans, we will be ill-equipped to deal with the greatest threat humanity has ever faced. And for this reason, we should urgently reduce greenhouse gases and sustain the resilience of our oceans. So how to do this? Firstly, by setting ambitious goals for shipping. The IMO has set the target of a reduction with 50% by 2030, and we are committed for raising the bar to 55% by 2030 and zero emissions by 2050. Secondly, we should invest in offshore wind energy. Belgium is a small country. It has only 67 kilometers of shoreline, if you compare it to the United States or Chile, but we are currently the 5th in the world in offshore winds in absolute terms. And we are working as we speak to double that capacity by 2030. So every country, no matter how small, can do its part and make a difference. That is also true when it comes to protecting our oceans. We should protect 30% of the ocean by 2030, as many colleagues have said already today before. It yields the best conservations, benefits, and enhances species diversity. Healthy marine ecosystems are better able to withstand rapid change like those brought on by climate change. And we can do this while still providing benefits and livelihoods to local communities and indigenous groups. This protection includes measures taken against the impact of underwater noise. And I especially want to refer to a recent study that we, Belgium, presented together with Canada, which showed clearly that measures against emission reduction can also be very effective against underwater noise. To take action towards these goals, we have launched the Blue Leaders, a coalition of ambitious countries that want to protect 30% of the oceans by 2030. And I would like to graciously address my fellow Blue Leaders, Minister Meza Murillo and Minister Alamand here today. It is my great pleasure to work with you both and other Blue Leaders to advance urgently needed protections for our blue planet. Both Costa Rica and Chile have been a driving force in encouraging other countries to adopt ocean elements in their climate goals. On behalf of the Blue Leaders, let me also extend, dear Jane, a warm welcome to Fiji. I am thrilled to hear of Prime Minister Bainimarama's announcement today to join our efforts. Fiji is a recognized leader on both ocean and climate issues in the Pacific and around the world. I would like also to thank Minister Joubert of Seychelles. We would be honored to have your government's continued support of the Blue Leaders' efforts and to personally work with you to reinforce Seychelles' strong ocean conservation legacy. Finally, I would like to extend a kind invitation to our co-host Special Envoy Kerry, who is no stranger to ocean conservation, as well as all states represented here today to join the Blue Leaders. The commitment, Jane, of the United States to join the 30 by 30 movement is of utmost importance. And this protection shouldn't end in our national waters, but should include global action on the high seas as well. So I'm looking forward to working with all countries represented here today to take these steps in protecting our ocean and our planet. It is, dear friends, by joining forces that we can win this battle and safeguard our planet for future generations. Thank you, Jane.
And thank you, Minister. Joining hands around the world. I love it. Minister Mesa, por favor, it is your turn.
Thank you, Jane. And well, being the last one after hearing all these inspiring words, I will say that I echoed everything that we have been hearing here. I think it's so inspiring, so clear to hear the importance of the ocean to address climate and biodiversity crisis. I mean, there's no other way. And that is why we will continue to be part of this leaders, this Blue Leaders Alliance, the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, Nature's Pledge. I mean, every partnership that tries to promote the importance of nature and the importance of ocean is critical. And as the minister has just mentioned, this 30 by 30 movement, it's so critical. We need to continue implementing concrete actions at the national level, but we need multilateralism, and we need to have a good and robust post-2020 framework at the CBD. And I think that everything here is working towards that big goal. In our case, we will continue doing our part, including nature in our enhanced NDCs, as we just did, the protection of these blue carbon ecosystems, which is critical to generate resilience, and which is critical also to consolidate the economy of the future, which is how we see it is, which is circular, green, and blue. And this economy of the future, we're very committed, and we know the needs to have MPAs as part of this, because we need healthy oceans, and it is critical to have productive oceans as well. So this interaction of seeing MPAs as part of this new strategy of the future, it is critical. In the case of Costa Rica, as you know it, we established protected areas in the terrestrial part, and we managed to increase and improve our productivity with tourism industry. So how we see it is that we will be creating these now blue protected areas, and we know that we will be starting and creating this new economy as well. It is the next phase. In our case, less of the 3% of our economic zone is under protected areas. And under this government, we want to move the needle and put it under 30% before 2022. And it is something that we're working on right now. We know it is ambitious, but we know that this is the critical decade of action, and we need to walk the talk. So we're very committed with the different partnerships. We're very committed with this community of the 30 by 30, and also so happy to see the US back on board to continue with all these efforts. And I would just leave it here, Jane. I think that we've been hearing a lot of good examples, and that we need to work at the multilateral level, but we also need to be doing our job at the national level. And it's so inspiring to be here also that's with national governments. And I think that this is a little bit the right and concrete elements to address these global threats. So thank you very much for organizing these, and we will continue seeing each other in this trip.
Muchas gracias, Minister. I really like the focus on ambition, but also walking the talk, and perhaps even swimming the talk, or some appropriate ocean analogy. Thank you all. And now finally in this panel, we have a pre-recorded message from Minister Joubert of Seychelles. Thank you, Minister, in advance. Please start the video.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to address you today to highlight the initiatives undertaken by the Seychelles to contribute to stronger ocean and climate ambition. Seychelles is an oceanic state with an exclusive economic zone of 1.3 million square kilometers. The people depends on the ocean for food, transportation, and for sustaining the two pillars of its economy, tourism and fisheries. Our identity is also linked to the ocean. We recognize the importance of a healthy ocean, the oceanic space that connects us all, and the potential that they can play to reduce the threats caused by a changing climate.
Globally, awareness is growing that the climate and biodiversity crisis are inextricably linked. Both must be addressed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Whether we are talking about increasingly erratic weather patterns, sea level rise, or the devastation of keystone habitats such as coral reefs, small island developing states are the first to be affected, and yet they are at the forefront of the battle against climate change. As a small nation, Seychelles has been bold enough to pioneer various initiatives. Through international partnerships and embracing innovative financing mechanisms such as our Debt for Nature Swap and Blue Bonds, we have become one of the first countries on the planet to protect 30% of its EEZ. We fully support this global effort to achieve this 30% target. Seychelles is putting a lot of emphasis on the protection of its coastal wetlands that include seagrass, mangroves, and salt marsh ecosystems. Our blue carbon coastal wetlands, which sequester and store vast amounts of carbon and sustain vital adaptation and ecosystem services for frontline communities. Despite the benefits these ecosystems provide to mitigate against climate change and foster greater resilience to its impacts, they remain some of the most threatened on the planet. Globally, we have already lost more than half of our coastal wetlands, depriving people and the planet of these crucial benefits. Their importance are being recognized now on the central roles they play in tackling climate change. The benefits they provide could be used in changing policies and informing the application of nature-based solutions. We must be able to monitor, measure, and manage these benefits. We also recognize the specific benefits that the ocean provides in addressing climate change. Our next National Determined Contribution document will commit to pioneering new technologies to map seagrass ecosystems across our entire EEZ and, subject to external support, build upon our existing work to effectively manage the 30% of our EEZ and commit to ensuring that at least 50% of our coastal wetlands are protected by 2025 and 100% by 2030. These NDC commitments are also being designed with long-term capacity building foremost in our planning. We are pleased that Seychelles government and local institutions, such as the Seychelles Climate Change Adaptation Trust and the University of Seychelles, are working with international partners, such as the Pew Trust, Oxford University, and the Nature Conservancy to further enhance Seychelles' long-term implementation capacities. Despite these gigantic steps, we still have many challenges at hand. Lack of human capacity and financial resources remain the critical factors. We need the support of the global community to enable us to meet our local objectives that not only contribute to the local, but also to the global agenda. With Seychelles being considered a developing country, the challenges that lay ahead are greater. I am calling on the global community to be part of this journey to enable us to achieve our goals, which contribute to our survival. I thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Excellencies all, for your eloquent words, but especially for sharing your inspiring examples and your beacons of hope. This brings to a close today's session on ocean climate action. But of course, our work continues. I can summarize what I heard today in 3 words: urgency, opportunity, and hope. As we look to the Leaders Climate Summit starting on Thursday, we are confronted daily with the realities of climate change and the urgency of the moment. The science is clear. The urgency is real. Our future is at stake. And with this urgency, we have heard strong opportunity, but strong messages of hope. From the depth of today's discussion, a clear message rises to the surface. The ocean holds powerful climate solutions. We dare not ignore them. We must embrace them. And in so doing, we will all benefit. As we look ahead to the Leaders Summit this week and the challenges that face us on the road to Glasgow, I call on everyone to expand our thinking to include the ocean's role in helping solve the climate crisis. I'm deeply grateful to each of the impressive leaders who joined us today, and also to those in local communities, citizens, in cities, states, and around the globe, and the national leaders whose decisions will be pivotal. I'm deeply proud to be part of the Biden-Harris administration, working with the international community and leaders, such as those from whom we've heard today, to solve this most pressing challenge and use the power of the ocean to get it done. My warm personal thanks to each of our speakers and to all of you for joining us today. Goodbye, happy Earth Week, and let's continue this work. All the best.